Hey, welcome back to my allotment garden. So we're nearing the end of June now, about to step into July, and I'm going to harvest all of my garlic today because it's ready for harvest. And also the Allium leaf miner is a little pest that burrows its way into the garlic and it's affecting my crop, and I want to harvest it all and preserve it before they do any more damage so that I can continue to enjoy my crop throughout the rest of the year. So I've got here a selection of hard and soft neck varieties of garlic. I've got about 7 different varieties. I bought mine from the garlic farm. I bought the Garlic Lovers selection, so I've got a great mix of different varieties in here. I planted them all in mid-October last year, so they've had all autumn and winter to get their roots down and become quite vigorous plants. And our cold winters here, we have quite hard frosts, which really helps the bulb to split into those little individual cloves. So if you find that you plant them quite late in the year and you don't have any hard frosts and you get one single bulb harvest, that could be why. You might not have had a really hard frost to help split them. So how do you know when they're ready to harvest? Well, if you plant them in the autumn, they're usually ready early summertime, so about now, sort of late June going into July, into sort of mid-July. If you plant them in the spring, they'll be ready a little bit later, more towards the end of July into August. And basically you're looking out for the leaves. The leaves tell you what's going on underneath, and the bottom set of leaves will start to yellow and crispen, and also the tips will do that as well. You can also just harvest them and see how they look. You know, if they still look really small and very green, give it a few more weeks and then try again. But as I said, I've got Allium leaf miner damage here, which means I'm going to be harvesting them a little bit early because I don't want my crop to go to waste. Signs of Allium leaf miner damage include white specks along the leaves. Also, if you're growing onions, you'll find they have really distorted leaves, like really twisted and gnarled. That's a sign the Allium leaf miner is doing its damage. And finally, if you harvest one, peel back the layers, you'll see the little orange grub, the larva stage, and that is what does the damage into the cloves. So that's the last thing to look out for, which is what I spotted on mine. But I already did see some of the markings, which led me to believe that I had it. So yeah, I think that's enough talking. It's time for me to pull them up and see what we've got. Now the first ones that I want to harvest are actually my elephant garlic, which is more closely related to a leek than a garlic. It's a lot softer and milder in flavour to garlic, and these ones are usually ready earlier than your actual hard and soft neck varieties, and you can see that the leaves have really yellowed. It did have some garlic scapes on that I've harvested already, and I'm just wondering, how big are my elephant garlic? Are they going to be enormous or kind of average? Now luckily my soil is quite loose that I can actually just use 2 hands and carefully pull it out, but if you have quite hard clay soil you may need to tease it. Okay, well I thought my soil was soft enough to just gently pull this one out, but maybe it's bigger than I imagined. So I'm actually using my hori knife to gently try and tease it out of the soil. I don't want to be digging it up. Well, there we are, first elephant garlic harvested. Let's see how the others look. Now this is quite interesting. So in the autumn time when I planted all the garlic and that elephant garlic, I didn't have room for all of the others, so I planted a few cloves into a seed cell tray, and then I planted those out once they shot up in early spring next to the elephant garlic. And I've just harvested one of those now. I can't remember if it was a hard or soft neck variety, but it's done that thing where it doesn't split. So I've got here just one single big bulb of garlic. I mean, it's still perfectly edible, it's just not split into those cloves. So what it means is it didn't get enough hard frost to help it do that. So yeah, I'm not going to plant in the spring from individual cell trays again. So yeah, good to know. Now on this one here, I must have had 2 cloves planted together or something, because I've got a bit of a twin thing going on. So I've got one big clove, one bulb even, and a really small one. It's been really interesting to see the different sizes of them come out for the different varieties that I planted, and so far I've had some brilliant results from the Iberian white garlic, and also this is the Solent white garlic, some really big fat cloves. I've still got the rest of the row to pull. I've only pulled a few so far, but they're really massive and I'm absolutely chuffed. So it's a good idea to plant a few different varieties so that you know which one in the future will grow best for your climate. So I remember reading on the Garlic Farm website that the Solent White is particularly adapted to the UK winters, so they don't mind growing in soil that's wetter, perhaps a bit heavier, maybe clay conditions. And right throughout the growing season, in the winter and the early spring, it was always miles ahead of all of the others. I remember it was much thicker and the leaves were already much taller. So it's really tempting to use and consume all of the biggest cloves and the biggest bulbs. But actually what you want to do for your future harvest, so long as they are good for storing and keeping, is to save the biggest and the best, dry them and use them for growing next season. So we'll be planting them again in the autumn time, mid-October. So I'm going to hope that I can store some of these and they won't be too damaged from the leaf miner. We'll see how they clean up. The size of that one is absolutely enormous. Oh, really big cloves, or bulbs should I say. Again, those outer layers are starting to tear away, so I know they wouldn't store for very long. It's definitely time for them to be harvested. But look at that, chuffed to bits. Yeah, I can definitely see Allium leaf miner in here. There, can you see Allium leaf miner? There's one there, one there, one there, another, and another right down here, and that's why these are not going to store very well at all. So I'm not going to be able to dry these as you traditionally would. Instead, I'm going to have to freeze them. As I mentioned in my June tour video, the Allium leaf miner is quite a new pest to the UK, and it's becoming more and more widespread, particularly in the Midlands, which is where I'm based. And there's not really a known treatment for it yet, especially organically. Once the larvae hatches, it can actually overwinter in the soil as well, so it can affect your following crop the next year if you grow it in the same patch. So obviously it's important to practice crop rotation, so you don't plant your same crops in the same place, but also, you know, the fly is going to land on the actual allium, whether it's garlic or onion, so you can prevent it by meshing your crop with a really fine net. So it's just a case of harvesting them, looking for that damage, and then storing your crop accordingly. And it's really important that we do not compost any of this leaf material. It's going to go into a black bin liner and I'm going to take it home. Well, what a harvest. I'm absolutely chuffed to bits with my garlic. This is probably my best year ever, I think, for garlic, despite the damage. And I'm just so thrilled. So now I've got this big empty bed that I'm not going to let go to waste. I've already planted 2 squash in here, and there are lots of other things that we can sow now and grow on through the winter for harvesting either before early autumn or into the winter months. So I myself am going to plant lots of beetroot in here, probably some more chard and spinach, but you could also plant out brassicas like your broccoli and Brussels sprouts for winter. So that's my harvest, and I haven't counted them, but there's at least 50 cloves here, and they're all great. No white rot either, which is a first. And white rot can stay in the soil for quite a few years, and you really can't get rid of it or grow in the same patch again. And it's basically like a white fluffy mold that develops around the garlic. So yeah, I'm really lucky that I didn't get any of that this year. But now it's time for me to, I'm going to peel back a few layers, cut away the foliage so it's easier for me to get these home, because this basket is really heavy. And then when I get home, I'll show you how I freeze them. But if you are going to be storing them long term and drying them, then you want to gather them in groups and hang them up, if you can, in a cool and dry environment where there's lots of ventilation, so they're not going to go mouldy or fusty. And you don't want it to be in really hot conditions either, like in a really hot sunny greenhouse, because that will impair the flavour. You might also have a rack that has holes on it, such as a seed table or tray, and you can just lay them out and leave them for about 3 or 4 weeks to fully dry before you plat or store them. So I'm going to get these cleaned up and take them home now, and I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so at home, and I'm going to show you how I would now declove all of my garlic bulbs ready for storing. And the first thing to do is to grab your garlic and start peeling away all of those outside layers. And this is actually much easier to do when it's still soft and fresh, so do it as soon as you can. And after you get down to the cloves, you want to separate them off so that we can tidy those up in just a moment. And now we've got a long stem on these, so we're just going to trim them off just above the actual clove. And then once they're trimmed, you should be able to give it a squeeze, and this is actually the outer casing of the garlic, which would usually be quite papery layers if it was dried. So we're now just got to peel that away as well to reveal the garlic clove that you want, and then all you need to do is to trim off that little woody end with a nice sharp knife. I was hoping to save some of my biggest bulbs for growing next year, but I realised that the allium leaf miner had really hidden itself down deep into the cloves, which means that I didn't want to risk any of them rotting, so I wasn't going to store and dry any of them. They're all going to go into the freezer. This really is quite a time-consuming job, but if you just set yourself up in front of a film, you can get through quite a few in a few hours, and whilst my hands did ache and stink of garlic for a long time afterwards, knowing that I'm not going to have to buy or peel any more garlic for a good few months is just such a relief. You know, I'm going to have my own homegrown garlic. It's going to taste so much better than anything from the shops. I'm going to be freezing my garlic in 2 separate ways. The first way is to freeze them whole, so I'm going to tip out all of those individual cloves onto a baking sheet, which is on top of a baking tray or a board, nice and flat. You want to spread them out so they're on a single layer, and then you're going to freeze these. Once they're frozen, I'll put them into a glass jar, which will then return back to the freezer. Just remember, the more solid the storage jar, the less chance it is of stinking out your freezer. Another thing I like to make is garlic paste, which is great for curries, and you want to take your garlic cloves, put them into a food processor and blitz them for a good minute or so. And after a while you may want to add a few drops of water, or some people prefer to use an oil, and then whiz it up some more until it forms a paste consistency. Take off the lid, scrape down the sides, give it another blitz, check the consistency, and then when you think it's ready, take it out and spoon it into a suitable container for your freezer. I'm using a plastic sandwich bag here, make sure you label it. then seal the bag, and what I do is I press it all out into a thin sort of layer and try and create little parcels or little pillows of garlic paste so it's easy to break off for my curries. So I use the back of a knife to make an indent, like a bit like a quilt cover onto the bag, so that when it freezes I can actually break off these segments quite easily. Well, thank you so much for joining me on my garlic harvest. It's been really fun and I'm so chuffed with my haul this year. How's your crop been? Have you harvested them yet, or are you going to wait a few more weeks? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.